All right, we're going to peel back 2,000 years of legend to get to the truth about the final, desperate battle of one of history's most iconic figures, Cleopatra. So, forget everything you think you know. The real story of her last 10 days isn't a romance. It's a dark, calculated chess match for power, for legacy, and for control. So, let me ask you something. When you picture Cleopatra's death, what's the first thing that pops into your head? It's a noble queen, right? Maybe a basket of figs and, of course, a deadly snake. It's probably one of the most famous death scenes in all of history. But what if I told you that whole story is almost certainly a lie? Yeah, that whole romantic, tragic ending, it's not history. It's pure propaganda. And it was crafted by her worst enemy to control her story long after he had taken her kingdom. The truth is way more brutal. And honestly, it tells us so much more about how power really worked in the ancient world. So let's dig in and find out what really happened. Okay, the myth of the asp. The story is fantastic. A snake hidden in a basket of figs. It's dramatic, it's symbolic, and it was perfect for the narrative Rome wanted to sell. It made Cleopatra seem exotic, foreign, even mystical in her death. But here's the thing. Even historians back then, people close to the events, were like, I'm not so sure about that. The real story was about a battle of wills. And this part right here is absolutely crucial. Her death wasn't a single, spontaneous act of despair. No way. It was the end result of a 10-day, systematic psychological campaign run by her conqueror, Octavian. It was a campaign designed to completely shatter her will. This wasn't a tragedy, it was a tactic. So, to really get what's going on, you've got to understand the two main players in this game. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, and Octavian, the guy who's about to become Emperor Augustus of Rome. They were locked in this high-stakes battle where only one of them could control how history remembered this moment. And their goals? They were polar opposites. I mean, you could not get more different. Octavian needed her alive. It was that simple. He had this vision of parading her through the streets of Rome in chains to prove his total victory. But Cleopatra, oh, she knew exactly what he wanted. So her goal was the one thing that would ruin his party, to die on her own terms and deny him his ultimate prize. For her, death was freedom. Now, we need to be really clear about what a Roman triumph actually was. This was not just a victory parade. Oh no, it was a ritual of public degradation. Imagine the worst possible shaming you can think of, then multiply it by 1,000. They'd parade you through the streets, humiliate you, and very often execute you at the end. Cleopatra had seen this happen. She knew that capture meant the complete destruction of her dignity, and that was a fate she would do literally anything to avoid. All right, here we go. Let's start the countdown. The clock starts on August 1st, 30 BC. Mark Antony is dead, Cleopatra is captured, and she's taken to the palace. And from this moment on, this wasn't just a waiting game. It was 10 days of intense, calculated psychological warfare. Just look at this timeline. You can feel the pressure ramping up, can't you? First, he isolates her. Then he brings in the ultimate threat, her children. Then, for 4 days straight, architects show up. Can you imagine a daily physical reminder of the cage being built for you? When she tries to fight back with a hunger strike, he doesn't use force, he uses her own son against her. It is just a masterclass in cruelty, all building to a fake offer of hope that was really just twisting the knife. So let's break this down, because this is basically Octavian's playbook, how to break a queen. Step 1, isolate her completely. No one to talk to, no one to plan with. Step 2, take away all of her control. Search her every single day, remove anything she could possibly use to harm herself. Step 3, and this one is just pure evil, weaponize her kids. And finally, the last turn of the screw, step 4, offer a little bit of false hope. Give her a lie that makes her surrender feel like she's being a good mother, not a defeated queen. And we're not talking about some abstract political bargaining chip here. We are talking about 4 kids. Her eldest, Caesarion, who was Julius Caesar's son, was a huge political threat to Octavian. But the lives of all 4 of her children were put on the table, weighed against her dignity. It's an impossible choice. I mean, can you even wrap your head around the horror of this? Architects showing up every day to discuss your public humiliation like it's an engineering problem. This quote, "The display must be properly constructed to accommodate you," it's beyond chilling. They're talking about her like she's a piece of cargo. Not a queen, not even a person. An object to be measured for its cage. But here's where Octavian messed up. He thought he had her. He thought he could break her. But somewhere around August 11th, something snapped. Cleopatra realized his promises were all lies. She figured out her son Caesarion was going to die no matter what she did. And in that moment, she stopped being a victim and she became a strategist again. And her final plan? It was just brilliant. She played his game. She makes a totally reasonable request. I just want to visit Antony's tomb to make offerings. Okay, fine. While she's there, she grabs a vial of poison she'd probably stashed weeks ago. Then comes the genius move, the distraction. She goes back to her room and asks for a basket of figs. Why? Because she knew the guards would search it, find nothing, and then relax. See, the figs weren't the weapon. They were the cover story for the story of the weapon he would later create. So when the guards finally burst in, what do they find? Not a broken woman. They find a queen, dead, dressed in her full royal regalia. Her loyal handmaiden, Charmian, is using her last breath to adjust her queen's crown. And when a guard asks if this was well done, her reply is just this final epic act of defiance. This wasn't a tragedy. It was a triumph of her will. So Cleopatra won the battle for her own body, no doubt about it. She robbed Octavian of his living trophy. But the war wasn't over, not by a long shot. There was still the battle for the story. And that was a war Octavian was determined to win. And this is how propaganda works, folks. It's brilliant in a terrible way. If you can't have the real thing, you just make one up. During his triumph back in Rome, Octavian had a statue of Cleopatra carried through the streets, with a snake attached to its arm. He literally created the snake story right there. The myth that we all know today, it was born out of his failure to get what he really wanted. So let's look at the final scorecard, right? Let's break it down. Control of her death, that's a huge victory for Cleopatra. She won that one. But the safety of her son, a devastating defeat. Caesarion was hunted down and killed just weeks later. And control of the narrative, well, Octavian won that one, hands down. His version of the story is the one that has survived for 2,000 years. And all of this leaves us with this one final, really haunting question. Think about it. Cleopatra's final act, it didn't save her kingdom. It didn't save her kids. All it did was save her from that one specific humiliation. It was an act of pure defiance that cost her everything and bought her nothing but the knowledge that her final choice was still hers. Was that enough? That's the question her story forces us to ask all these years later.